and welcome to No Offseason. I'm Zena Cada.
And I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And today on the show, March will be here before we know it. So we're going to go ahead and kick off our bracket watch early. Who's in line for the top #1 seed? Which teams are in the running to host? And which squads might surprise everyone by punching their way into the tournament? Plus, our resident bracketologist, Eden Laase, will join us as we dive into a women's hoops team that has a winning streak that everyone should know about. New Yorkers, y'all probably know who I'm talking about. But first, the WNBA released its schedule on Wednesday, a move that raised some question marks and definitely my eyebrows, given that the CBA negotiations are still ongoing and could impact key aspects of the upcoming season. Sabreena, you wrote about this on Wednesday, and for those of you that haven't read it, we got to ask you, why did the league choose to release the schedule now?
Right. So you think about leagues that go through work stoppages or lockouts or strikes, they are unable to release schedules for upcoming seasons because there are no terms of agreement. There's no collective bargaining agreement in place that would govern how the next season would look. And because the WNBA is in this unique situation where we're in a status quo period, there's no strike, there's no lockout, everything is proceeding according to normal working conditions other than free agency, which was governed by the moratorium. The league can plan ahead for next year. And that's what it is trying to do because you're looking at a summer where you have arena availability conflicts, right? Like a lot of the arenas here host concerts during the WNBA season. They have other events that happen over the course of the WNBA season. So it's a matter of getting availability. It's just a matter of getting everybody planned and sort of just on the same page for if and when the season does start. That isn't to say that they are like going over the players' unions' heads or anything. It's just the schedule was released for 2025 in December of 2024. So this is about the time it would be happening, you know, under normal circumstances, which these are obviously not normal circumstances, but the WNBA, you know, is just trying to plan ahead. I think there's nothing sinister about it. It's just, hey, we're assuming we're going to have a season eventually. And when it does, we would just like to be better prepared as opposed to having to rush everything because there's so many things that have to happen after a CBA. This technically doesn't have to happen after the CBA.
Right. So I like the idea that if the CBA is met and, you know, the terms are met and they move forward, this is already in place. You don't have to worry about the schedule. It was interesting to think about the fact that, you know, the schedule gets released and the 44 games seem like a massive aspect of it because we know that the WNBA is looking to try to expand the season. But we know that even if they were to come to terms with that within this new CBA, it definitely wouldn't happen in this 2026 season. There seems to be a lot of shrinkage in terms of the amount of time that the WNBA has to be able to play this season. What are some of the factors that are having an impact on the schedule and the expanse of the schedule?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right that the WNBA has proposed adding more games to the schedule. And we saw in 2025, it expanded from 40 to 44 because of the addition of the Golden State Valkyries. And you might ask yourself, hey, there's even more team expansion in 2026 with Toronto and Portland. Why aren't we getting more games? And there's a couple reasons for that. One, they are still governed by the terms of the current collective bargaining agreement, which has a maximum of 44 games. The new one might have, you know, expanded possibilities, but for now, all the WNBA could do is 44 games. So if we're in status quo, that's the number of games you're getting. Also, you may notice the start of the schedule is a little bit earlier than it has been in years past, about a week earlier in May. The end of the schedule a little bit later than it has been in September. That's because there is a 2-week break in the middle, not even really in the middle, sort of towards the end of the season for the FIBA World Cup, which is going to be held in Germany from September 4th to 13th. And the WNBA obviously expects a lot of its players to be competing for their national teams during the World Cup. So you can't really have games during the World Cup. So you'll notice teams are playing games through the end of August, and then there's a bit of a gap, and then they sort of restart around September 17th to close out the last 4 to 5 games of the regular season.
That is so awkward. I feel
Super
like the
awkward.
Olympic break wasn't bad because it was perfectly lined up. All-star,
A
they go play
mid-season
the
break,
Olympics.
you know?
It was mid-season break, exactly. But this, we're almost done, but just give us a little moment.
Real quick.
Let's go play on the world scale real quick. And
I
then
thought the
we'll come
goal
back.
was to finish the regular season before the World Cup and then have a break before the postseason.
Yeah.
But I also can understand how that's awkward because you're not preparing for the playoffs, then you're preparing for the World Cup. So I think any way you place this break is going to be weird for the WNBA because of FIBA's calendar. And the good news is that the next time there will be a FIBA Basketball World Cup in 2030, they've already set that in November, so it will not interfere with the WNBA's schedule.
Oh, that's okay. That's good at least. Yeah, this year's gonna be a
A little
awkward.
yeah.
Okay, let's keep talking about some of the things that I thought were really, really cool. Number one, there's new teams, and I mean, we're gonna get into some of these schedule release videos, but the twin babies being depicted as Toronto and Portland, which I believe might have been in New York's debut or their schedule release video. Love that because yes, they are two new teams, brand new to the WNBA. Of course, Toronto Tempo and the Portland Fire will debut, and they're debuting early, Sabreena.
Yeah, they both get opening weekend slots. I'm curious how we're going to classify the Portland Fire's first game because they're not debuting necessarily. They still do retain the history of the 3 seasons of the Portland Fire that existed from 2000 to 2002. So it's like a relaunch. I don't know. But definitely the debut of the Toronto Tempo is happening, and the debut of the Portland Fire or relaunch of the Portland Fire is happening the day after. So they each get their own separate marquee event. So it's not like the WNBA is just putting all of expansion out on one night. They get separate nights to celebrate their entry or re-entry, however you want to classify it, into the WNBA.
Okay. I love that. And I also love that we don't have to wait till July to see the reigning champs and their foe that went down, Phoenix Mercury, and the Las Vegas Aces will match up earlier this year. Finally, we don't have to wait so long.
Opening day for the Aces and Mercury.
Yeah, I love that. We're also getting open weekend Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clark. So we haven't seen Caitlin Clark in a very long time. Of course, she went down with injury earlier or towards the middle part. I feel like it all
right before
All-Star. Right before All-Star. Yep, exactly. Last season. And so we haven't seen a bunch of her. I know people were clamoring when they saw her at Team USA camp. So now Paige Beckers, Caitlin Clark being pit against each other on opening night. Could potentially be, I know we had the whole Chicago Sky Indiana Fever rivalry that was really a big thing, and now there's this Dallas Wings Indiana Fever thing happening. Thoughts on that opening weekend matchup?
Yeah, I think we were kind of force-fed a lot of Indiana-Chicago last year, and it wasn't super competitive. Even with the injuries that Indiana suffered, they very convincingly won those matchups. I mean, we got 5 of them last year, which just felt kind of like overkill. So I like the shift. The last 2 number 1 picks with Caitlin and Paige. Obviously, there will be another number 1 pick before that happens, but it would also be on Dallas. So the last 4 number 1 picks will be a part of this matchup with Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark, and then the 2 Dallas players. So that's really fun. And as you said, we haven't seen Caitlin in a very long time. We only got Caitlin Clark versus Paige Beckers once during the 2025 WNBA season. It was kind of anonymous, like sort of tucked away in the middle of a game because Dallas wasn't doing particularly well either. So it's nice to start off the season with that because, everybody's watching those Team USA videos. Saw a lot of Caitlin, saw a lot of Paige. Caitlin didn't play for a while. Paige didn't get to play in any meaningful games in 2025. So to put them right at the start of the season, I think is super fun. Just a little breakdown because there are 44 games and now there are 15 teams. Every team in the Western Conference will play, I should say every team will play 2 teams in their conference 4 times, sort of like their primary rivals, and then they play everybody else 3 times. So we're not going to get this 5 matchup thing again. Sure. There's just too many teams for that to happen in a 44-game schedule.
You know what it makes me think of? And I don't know if this is with all parents, but I know immigrant parents are good for this. You tell your immigrant parent you like this one snack, you better believe that your entire pantry will be filled with that snack a year's worth, okay? So the WNBA was like, oh, you guys like this matchup? You guys like this quote-unquote rivalry? Here's 5 of them, even if it is nauseating by the time you finish the third. Yeah, no, it was a little bit much last year, but I think we can refresh some things, and I think that this is a great way to do it. Another great way to do it, honoring history. This is the 30th season. Sabreena, this is huge. The fact that we're like barely talking about this is crazy, but it's because obviously there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. Cloud called the CBA. But I loved learning this part. The Sparks and the Liberty are going to be playing on the league's 30th anniversary. That is like, I got goosebumps reading that. That's so dope.
Yeah, it's really cool. They're doing it in LA again, just like it was on opening night of the 1997 WNBA season, which weird to think that it was on June 21st, but it was a much shorter season back then with only the 8 teams. I had forgotten that the Liberty won that game, honestly. I always remember that Penny Toller scored the first points in WNBA history. Cool to be playing this game in LA where her jersey is retired. Another nod to all of the history that, brings the WNBA into season number 30. So I think that's awesome. I don't know if the WNBA is still going to have its Rivals Week that we talked about last year. We're currently in NBA Rivals Week, which has some of its own conversation.
Right.
Maybe that's part of it. I do think honoring that history, making a nod to, it's not necessarily a historical rivalry because they didn't really have a lot of contests against each other in the playoffs, but it's very cool that, even if it's not on opening night, it's on the 30th, or at least it's not the 30th anniversary technically because it's 1997. This is verbiage that's going to trip me up for the entirety of this year. Yeah. We're not in the 30th anniversary season. We are in the 30th season. So things are happening on the 29th anniversary of when they happened in 1997. But no, I like that they picked the same date. It's cool. And, you wouldn't necessarily want Liberty Sparks on the first night of the season because nothing really happened between them last year. So it's cool that at least that gets honored on the exact date that it happened.
Yeah, that's so dope. I really hope as many people from those first two teams can be there in person, can be honored. I'm trying to think of, we got to get Tyra Banks there. She was sitting courtside at that first game. I feel like that's really important. I think she lives in Australia now. Tyra Banks, if you listen to us, you got to be courtside for this, okay? You got to bring back the star. And let's make it a star-studded affair.
Totally.
This is so dope. This is so awesome. And then, of course, the Commissioner's Cup is going to be back for year 6. Hey, I'm going to tell you right now, NBA Cup, looking real good these days. People are excited to win NBA Cup, and it is modeled a lot after the Commissioner's Cup, which is also modeled after European soccer, but we're not going to talk about that. WNBA Commissioner's Cup is back for year 6. Last year, Beaver Lynx, I thought it was very competitive. I don't think that we all expected.
There have been 5 different Commissioner's Cup champions in the first 5 years. So, if you were a team that has not yet won the Commissioner's Cup title, you have a good chance as anybody.
There's hope. There's hope. No, it's awesome that they're continuing that tradition, getting a little extra money, giving some money to charity. It's fun. It's competitive. It gets the juices flowing early, gets you playing some meaningful games early in the season. But before we
Eventually, I would like an expansion of the Commissioner's Cup. As it currently stands, you have all the Western games, and then the top seed in the Western Conference gets a bid. Mm-hmm. The top seed, I should say, in the Commissioner's Cup game gets a bid to the final, and then the top seed in the Eastern Conference among their Commissioner's Cup games makes the final. And now, because the conferences are bigger, you have more Commissioner's Cup games on each side of the conferences because there are 8 West teams and 7 East teams, so there are 7 Cup games on the West and 6 on the East. What I would like is for them to sort of throw a semifinal in here somehow. If you were to potentially have 3 groups of 5 instead of 8 and 7, then you have, your 4 games in your group, and then the top 3 seeds plus a wild card could do a semifinal and then a final. I also think it's time we move the Commissioner's Cup final to a neutral site. It's very hard for people to plan so close to when the final happens. I think it'd be a good way to, let's say you held it in Cleveland, right? As hey, Cleveland's coming to the league next year. Let's have the Commissioner's Cup final here. So something to think about for 2027, since we're already, far beyond the possibility here. We're not amending the schedule. Let's make that clear. This is the schedule. Unless games don't start by May 8th, this is the schedule. So something to think about for 27. I think there's interesting things that can happen with the Commissioner's Cup that don't have to relegate it to East-West all the time.
1,000%. I feel like, NBA Cup borrows a little from the WNBA. And now the WNBA can borrow a little bit from the NBA Cup because they have those pods. They're the group play first, and they have the semifinals, and they have a neutral site in Las Vegas.
They have a quarterfinal, too. We don't need to get that far, but I think the semifinal would be nice.
Exactly. Okay, so I was jumping the gun, but I appreciate you breaking that down with the Commissioner's Cup. I like that idea. Again, WNBA, you listening? I don't know. Maybe you are. Ideas.
And Tyra Banks, right, everybody.
And Tyra Banks. W, figure it out. Call her up, okay? Go eat her ice cream soup. Excuse me. It is not ice cream soup. It is.
That sounds terrible.
Have you seen this?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh my gosh. It was a whole phenomenon. She's basically selling hot ice cream. And she is not calling it melted ice cream. I can't remember. Listeners, tell me I'm not crazy. You have seen this. She has opened up stores in Australia. We're going to hit her up. She's going to be courtside for that Sparks Liberty game. Let's get back on track. I got to talk about some of these. This was a missed opportunity for some of these teams to hit up Tyra for their cameos, for their schedule releases, because I really want to quickly, before we get into bracketology, talk about these schedule releases and what we liked, what we didn't like, who was our favorite. So I wanted to start with, Sabreena, which one was your favorite schedule release?
So I'm not even sure this was actually a schedule release, but it was posted yesterday, so I think it was. It was Nate Tibbetts becoming a business intern for the Phoenix Mercury.
That's crazy.
It's so
Me
good.
too. It's so good. It's nostalgia to Sports Center, like the old Sports Center, but it's also like The Office. He was so
He was
good.
so charming the whole way through.
So charming. I loved him, like, also doing what we've done in corporate spaces, being in meetings and not knowing what the hell we're talking about.
Like drawing up basketball plays in the Q3 analysis he's talking about coming out for the third quarter of a game.
I was like not expecting you to say that. I'm very happy.
I think my favorite part is when he's working the front desk and like bringing people in and he says like, "Hey, Scott," and you can clearly see the guy's name tag says Andrew and he's like, "You shouldn't call him the wrong."
Just wrong. My favorite was when he was watching them play pickup basketball and he was just like, "Yeah, go," like, you know, trying to encourage them, like trying to fight the coach within him. It was so good. It was really so good. So yeah, shout out Phoenix and their stick little characters that they did, like the cartoon drawings as well. I like that too. So I don't know. Phoenix was like all around great job. I actually took notes. So I just want to really quickly. I do want to give credit to Portland for having the most niche, nostalgic schedule release.
It's so
because
very
if you're
Portland.
not from Portland, you don't get it. Okay, and
which I didn't get a lot of it.
Right. If you're not from Portland, if you've never watched Portlandia, this was very millennial coded. This was very Portland coded. You noticed something, Sabreena, that I completely even missed. So when the
very
video starts, what did you
beginning,
see?
Carrie Brownstein is reading this book and she's like, "Yeah, I'm reading Transforming Basketball," which is a book written by the new head coach of the Portland Fire, Alex Sarama.
That completely, I think I was just like still catching up. I was like, oh, Fouquet's, okay. I didn't even grab that. And I know that it's like the constraints-led approach. Yeah, I love that. Valkyrie's having Kayla Thornton. I liked any integration of the players. So Kayla Thornton being a terrible graphic designer. It was good. It was good. It was cute. It was very similar to like the Office internship type of thing. The Washington Mystics spy movie, I like the effort. It was a lot. Like it was a. It
also just kind of bummed me out that I missed going to the Spy Museum when I was in DC last month. So something to get back on my radar. Yeah.
Right. New York, also very millennial coded. They had Family Matters, Miss Ellie as Miss Cleo, the Animal Planet. Like there were so many good references that if you are of a particular age, you get. If you're the new babies, you had no idea what they're talking about. But that's okay. That's okay. Dallas, your whole staff must be of some sort of color because Monaleo and all of those influencers having a ball in that office. I was like, who is working the staff at the wings? I need to know. But I love Monaleo as a rapper in general. The influencers I thought it was like a lot. There was also some kind of bad acting, but they were on point with representing each of their teams. I will say that. And, you know, the Toronto Legos. I like the Legos.
Yeah.
It was very cute. I wanted to ask you, what did you think about the Orly nails? For the
honestly,
LA
not
Sparks?
super memorable. Like didn't resonate for me at all. It was just there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was the thing, I would say, in overall, like, opportunities. If you're going to do something with a sponsored brand for this, it's gotta feel authentic, but also
we just hit
memorable as
this.
well.
Like the Sparks are playing their 30th WNBA season, which only 4 teams in the league can say. You know, Phoenix, New York, Las Vegas, and the Sparks. And, you know, a little more nod to that would have been cool. It felt like you're missing out on a special opportunity here. I do just want to highlight real quick the Chicago Skies schedule release, the Art But Make It Sports.
Yeah.
Not my favorite release, and here's why. Not that I don't love Art But Make It Sports, but the whole point of that is that it's a special sporting image that you then translate into art. And these were just boring. Run-of-the-mill sports images.
Yeah.
So we're sort of wasting the purpose of it here. So I like the idea, but I don't think it's the correct execution of like why Art But Make It Sports works.
Agreed. I feel like some teams kind of mailed it in. I'm not gonna lie. Minnesota, I get you were partnering with A24. The Euphoria is not even a movie. It's not even a movie. It's a series. I'm sorry. I love y'all, but no. I'm so sorry. I was not a fan. I was not a fan of LA's Orly Nails. Indiana. Now, as an ADHD girly, ASMR is cool. But that board felt like we have 24 hours to do something. So we didn't think this through.
Honestly, I wouldn't even mind if a team was just like, we have a couple slides in the Instagram carousel. That's what we're gonna have to schedule. That's okay. It doesn't have to be like this every year. We're not the NFL.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Right? Remember that one year everyone made a Game of Thrones thing? Yeah. Clearly people have been trying to top that ever since. Okay, we got to move on. But shout out to the schedule releases. Shout out to all the marketing teams, because you do know there's a lot of work that goes into those. So
Totally.
We appreciate your efforts, everyone, and hopefully you guys do what they're telling you to do. Go get your tickets and make sure you're set up for the season. On the other side of this break, though, we're going to talk to Eden Laase about everything that's going on the college space and bracketology. Don't go anywhere. All right, we are excited to welcome Eden Laase to the show. Eden is a writer for our Bracket Central series, offering an inside look at the lead up to the men and women's NCAA tournaments, plus analysis and picks during the tournaments. If you have no idea what's about to happen in March, don't worry, Eden's got you. Eden, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
We're excited. You are new to our world of no off season, so I know our listeners are going to be very excited to have you, as you're going to be the ones guiding them into bracketology. You kicked things off a couple weeks ago with your bracket watch, so I want to go ahead and just dive right in. I don't feel like this is going to be a hard question, okay? But if Selection Sunday were today, who would you give that number 1 seed to and why?
Yeah, so the thing I'll say is it's not different right now. Who I would give it to and who the committee will, it would be the same. But in terms of bracketology, it's all about me trying to figure out what I think the committee will do, not necessarily what I would do. That being said, if it was a committee of one and it was me versus the actual committee, it would still be UConn right now for that number 1 overall.
I feel like that's pretty easy to get to. I feel like we've already discussed why we think UConn is number 1. But in the wins that they're doing, the dominant fashion in which they're winning, that all makes sense. But once it gets past UConn, things get interesting. And this is where I want to get to know more about what you just said, thinking about what the committee is going to do. So we've done this now, I think, 2 years or so, Sabreena. We've had our bracketology, and we've talked to Sabreena, we've talked to Chantel, we talked to Ben. We had another bracketology resident expert on our team that is now with Toronto Tempo. Shout out, Mark. But what I want to know is your process, Eden. When you start watching games and you're taking your notes, is there a ridiculous whiteboard somewhere in your house? What does your process look like? How do you get into bracketology?
Yeah, so speaking of Mark, shout out Mark for me as well, because he really helped me kind of figure out how to do this.
Oh, awesome.
I don't have a whiteboard, but I do have an Excel sheet, which has been really
virtual whiteboard
plaguing me for
virtual
a while
whiteboard,
here.
Exactly.
So essentially the first step is, and I also have to shout out my older sister Ellen, because she's an engineer, so she helped me set up a math equation to figure out how to do all this, right? So we have a little equation, and that kind of gets us our rankings, and then I move those around based on, who had a big win, who looked really bad in a game, etc. But I will say, the first thing in bracketology is net rankings are king. The committee loves net rankings. Those have more weight than anything else. There's obviously other factors like, strength of schedule, win percentage, quad 1, quad 2, etc. But they love the net. So that's kind of why you'll see, even when LSU hadn't beat anybody and they had lost those first 2 games in conference, they were still pretty high up in the seeding because they have a great net ranking, because they were blowing out those teams in the beginning of the year. So that's always going to be the biggest factor. And then, of course, there's all these other things that go into it.
There you go. Okay. And then, Sabreena, I know we've talked about this ad nauseum, but break it down one more time in case you got some new listeners. Net rankings, quad 1, quad 2, what does that actually mean for teams?
The NCAA has a formula that determines the net ranking, and that sort of gets into strength of schedule and how many wins you have and how many wins are against good teams, how many bad losses you have, margin of victory, all that sort of thing. The question that you posed at the beginning of this, who should be the overall number 1 seed, it seems very obvious that it should be UConn, although maybe Vanderbilt could plug its way into this conversation depending on how many SEC games they win. UCLA has been trumpeting their case for the overall number 1 seed, and that is because they have 9 quad 1 wins, and that's basically the number of wins you have over the certain top quartile of the NCAA population, right? And UConn only has 5 of those wins, and I don't think they're going to get very many of more of those wins over the course of their schedule because they play in the Big East, and there aren't really quad 1 teams in the Big East. Whereas UCLA, if they run the table in the Big Ten, could up this number to like 14 or 15, right? So that's sort of one of the distinguishing factors of like, hey, you look at UConn eye test wise, they're the best team in the country, right? They beat teams by a magnificent margin. They're winning every single game, and yet, you could look at teams in the SEC or the Big Ten, and they have such a higher difficulty every day that they show up that should that be rewarded, even if they have 1 or 2 losses versus a team that goes undefeated over the course of its entire regular season. And that's sort of something that UConn has faced over the last 5 years. Like, I don't think they've gotten a 1 seed since maybe the 2020 tournament. And that's just because their schedule is not giving them the same opportunities relative to other teams in the field.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that Big East conference kind of anchor.
It's not so big.
Yeah, it kind of bogs them down a little bit. I'm just curious, Eden, if the loss that UCLA had versus Texas, does that hurt them in any way to get that top seed?
In terms of getting the number 1 overall seed, a little bit, but the committee is very much a what have you done for me lately kind of situation, right?
Yes.
So when the season's over, they're going to value what teams have done at the end of the season a lot more than they're going to value what they did at the beginning, which is unfortunate for a team like UConn because they can't really do anything, right? They schedule really hard. They have one of the best strengths of schedules. I believe they had the best non-conference strength of schedule, but like Sabreena mentioned, the Big East isn't that big when it comes to top teams, right? So it becomes hard for them. That being said, UCLA, there is a case for them down the line to potentially get that number 1 overall seed if they were to win out in the Big Ten, not lose a single game in that conference. When it is very strong, then go on to win the Big Ten tournament. I think the committee would really value that, like I said, because they care about what you've done right now. But I don't think you could really go wrong. Like, if that was how it ended, I don't think you could really go wrong with either one of them.
Yeah.
But again, that doesn't mean I don't think UConn is the best team in the country, because I do. It's just this weird thing that we call bracketology where we can't really, what I think doesn't matter. So I'm just trying to predict what they might end up doing.
Now, before we turn our attention to who might be hosting, I just want to bring up the school that, Sabreena, you just mentioned, Vanderbilt, someone that hasn't taken a loss yet. And they're also in a conference that is very competitive and definitely more competitive than the Big East. They could rack up some big-time quad 1 wins. We're preparing for them to face off against South Carolina, which will be, I think, a massive test of just how resilient they are and how talented they are as a team. But how much is the case, for Vandy being built right now with the win, especially that they just had over Michigan?
Yeah, I think Vandy has a massive case to get into the number 1 conversation right now. They are my number 1, number 2 seed.
Okay.
And just depending on how things go in the SEC, if they finish as the top team in the SEC, again, another really, really good conference, then there certainly is, no way to really argue that they should get a 1 seed. The problem right now is going to be that, to me, I think, again, like I said, the way UCLA is playing, I think that their conference is strong enough that I think they're going to end up being kind of a lock for number 1 unless something wild happens. UConn's kind of a lock for number 1. So then it's okay, we have all these SEC teams competing for the last 2 spots, right? So I do think we'll see 2 SEC teams in there as number 1 seeds. It's just a matter of which ones we see.
Ooh,
right, and Vanderbilt really controls their own destiny there because they will play South Carolina and they will play Texas, and you have an opportunity to prove yourself in the regular season against those teams and probably in the conference tournament as well for the SEC.
There you go. Okay, so let's talk about the teams that will be hosting, because we know that is a huge advantage in the tournament, not having to go anywhere for a while before you have to go play some really even bigger games. What teams, I like the way you placed it, if you were the committee of 1. If you were the committee of 1, what teams would you have hosting in the tournament?
Right. So obviously we have those 4 number 1s that we talked about. Again, if the season ended today, UConn, UCLA, South Carolina, Texas. Then my 2s are Vandy, Louisville, TCU, and LSU. Then we have the 3s, which are Iowa, Michigan, Kentucky, Michigan State. Then the 4s, I still have Maryland holding on, but it is close. They're getting ready to potentially drop down. Baylor, Ohio State, and then this one is probably the most shocking given how they started the season, but my final number 4 is Duke. Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Okay,
Kara
but Zena,
Lawson
what
turned
team
things
should be
around,
ahead
huh?
of Duke in this
No, you're
conversation?
right.
I'm not saying this is a homer. I'm just saying, like, considering the wins that they picked up.
No,
Yeah,
you're
I think-
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. They have turned things around. But I'm just saying it's just like it is wild that we're having this conversation when, I mean, we started the season with them being in the top 10 in the country. And
Yeah, I
when I'm
don't-
telling you, within a day, we went to sleep, we woke up, they were like out of the conversation. It was crazy. Some of the losses that we had seen, just they looked discombobulated on both ends of the floor. But now we've seen them kind of pick some things up. What were the wins that you saw and the aspects of those wins that made you go, you know what, Duke, you win this conversation too?
Yeah, Sabrina, I don't think you're being a homer at all. I think, to me, it's pretty clear. I do think some people would make an argument for Tennessee, but to me, just the way they've run the table since that last loss to LSU, and they've got good wins in there. Like, people don't give them enough credit, but South Dakota State's a really solid team, and they beat them by over 30 points. Like, they beat Syracuse, who is right now in the field. They beat Notre Dame, they beat Cal, they beat Stanford, who's kind of in and out of that top 25. They beat Virginia, who's a bubble team. So they're really, they look good, and, they weren't afraid to play all these really, really tough teams. So I think, the way they scheduled in the beginning of the season was a little terrifying. Watching them play was concerning.
Terrifying is a hilarious word,
It
but
was
you're right.
terrifying, right?
The gauntlet they went through, South Carolina, UCLA, LSU, that was tough.
Yeah, one thing that Duke's schedule shows is that you don't get punished as much for good losses, right? Like losing to Baylor, who's another hosting team that Eden mentioned, and those 3 teams that you mentioned, doesn't affect you in the same way as it would if you lost to, like, Central Connecticut State, right? Like, it's okay if you schedule good teams and you lose. Although I do wonder how much the losses to South Florida and West Virginia should be considered here, because those were not good losses.
Yeah, those were tough
No,
ones.
but remember what I said about, the committee is, what have you done for me lately? Like, they're winning so many games right now, so they're going to be less likely to point out the fact that they lost to a West Virginia team with 5 players, or that they lost to South Florida, And
those were interesting circumstances. We're not going to
that whole
go back into that whole melee was weird.
It was crazy.
Yeah. Definitely, if you don't know what we're talking about, we talked about it on the show, but definitely go back and see what happened between West Virginia and Duke. That was a strange game. And then that was what really opened up that 4-streak loss that went into that gauntlet that I just listed for Duke. But the Tennessee thing is interesting. Like, what is it that Tennessee needs to do to possibly push themselves up into the conversation?
Yeah, I think Tennessee, also has a good chance to move up because of their conference. It takes one good win in that conference, and then you kind of get pushed up a little bit. The SEC is stronger than the ACC.
Yeah.
So if they're able to, get an upset or 2, they'll definitely be in that 4-seed conversation.
There's a couple other teams that I have an eye on just for hosting potential. What about Princeton?
Ooh.
I love that you said that, because I think Princeton is incredible. I often think that there should be more mid-majors kind of higher up in these tournaments. I don't know that the committee will do that, just because, especially, I do think, the last couple years, the Ivy, the top 3 teams have been really good in Princeton, Harvard, and Columbia. This year, that's the same, but Columbia and Harvard aren't quite as good as they have been, so it's a little harder for them. I would love to see Princeton host, though, just because, I think they are a really, really good team. I think they're not valued as highly as they should be, just because they're a mid-major, they play in the Ivy, but I love that you brought that up, because I think that would be incredible.
Okay, all right. Any other teams, Sabreena, that you've got in the hosting conversation?
I mean, we talked about them a little on our earlier show this week, but could Texas Tech get into this conversation?
Yeah, Texas Tech is, I think they could as well, and I did have them hosting earlier, but they've had a couple losses that were not the best. I think that BYU loss is really going to get
after
them.
yesterday. Yeah, that's a toughie.
Yeah. And this is the crazy thing about bracketology, right? Is it changes so much day by day. So we're recording this on Thursday, and then tomorrow when my bracketology goes out, this could all be different.
Right.
That's just how it
Thursdays are
goes.
big days.
Yeah, Thursday is huge. So, but I do think Texas Tech could get itself back in there. I just think that BYU loss was particularly tough for them.
Whew, okay. Is there any space of redemption for Iowa State to get into this conversation? Eden, help us out for the Iowa State fans.
This is okay. I'll start with the bad. Iowa State, you don't want to hear this, but you guys actually are a bubble team right now, which is nuts.
Whoa. Wow. Yeah.
And
Okay. Hey, it's real.
That's because their strength of schedule was really bad. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say it, but they didn't play. They played Iowa. That was a good one. But other than that, their non-con strength of schedule was not very good. And then they've lost, they lost those 5 games in a row. But they, again, it's so volatile. They just got Ariana Jackson back, which is huge for them. She's their best defender. Once Addie Brown is back, this is a completely different team, right? So I think those 5 losses are kind of going to be a thing of the past here in the future if everybody's healthy and they win a bunch of games. I don't think we're needing to be too concerned about them. They're on the bubble, like, again, if the season ended literally this second. But by the time the season's over, I don't see that being the case. So I do think they could move up pretty quickly and get back into kind of that hosting conversation, depending on how they do down the stretch.
Okay. All right. I want to, on that, I don't think that Iowa State would be considered a sleeper team, but you just also mentioned South Dakota State. Talk about some of these mid-majors.
Yeah.
We want to kind of turn the attention to folks that might surprise us and earn a spot in the tournament overall. Not necessarily a host, but just will be punching a ticket to the tournament. And you're like, oh, I didn't know we were selling those to you, but yes, here you are.
Yeah, I think the A10 is way stronger than people realize this year. Rhode Island has currently got the auto bid from that league, and they're a really strong team. But I think George Mason, Richmond, and Davidson could all potentially get in. I don't think the committee
another repeat. They always are this good, right?
Yes, I don't think the committee is going to give 4 bids to the A10, but I do think we definitely will see 2, I think, and we could see 3. So, if a team like Richmond gets in, right, they're always going to be a team to watch just because of Maggie Dugan. Like, she's one of the best players in the country. She's always going to be one of the best players in the country. She was phenomenal against UCLA last year in the first round of the tournament. And so, or maybe the second round.
Yeah.
Second round.
They just absolutely beat the tails off of Georgia Tech in the first round. A good Georgia Tech team.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, they're always a team that could do something because they have one of the best players in the country on their team. And they're a really solid mid-major team that's got a lot of chemistry. They've played together a long time, that kind of thing. So I think we could see an A10 team kind of be sneaky good in the tournament. Again, Princeton, I think, is always a team that when they, are a lower seed that beats somebody in the first round, I'm like, I guess that's an upset, but not really because they're so good, right?
So good, yeah.
They are. Okay.
Yeah, and anyone who hasn't watched Princeton, you really should because
I think this is sort of where we see like the divergence between the AP poll and the bracket, which I think a lot of people are interested in because, my ballot is a little bit different. I'm sure yours is, but like Princeton is going to be getting like top 20 votes this week, probably like in that late teens, early 20s. And yet I don't know that the committee is going to consider them for like a 5 seed, right? So why is there such a divergence between how, the pollsters view Princeton versus how they're seated?
Yeah. So I think the big thing about the AP poll is, again, it's purely opinion from one person to another. We all have different criteria on how we do our rankings, whereas the committee, supposedly, they all have the same kind of ideology going into it, right? We can argue whether or not that's true because, of course, there's still a human component to it, and we all have our own biases and all that. But when it comes to the AP poll, it's basically however many people vote, watching these teams, watching the game, saying, I think this team's better than this team. And it doesn't always necessarily reflect in what the committee is going to do because of those things like strength of schedule, right? So at the beginning of the season, I looked at LSU and I thought, this is a good team. I'm going to have them in the top 10, even though I know they're not going to play anybody until conference play. Whereas if, they only played those very beginning games in the season, they probably wouldn't be in an NCAA tournament, that kind of thing, right? So, yeah, it's very, very different based on, all these different factors. And again, like that that math component of who did you play, how much did you beat them by, what's your strength of schedule. All those things go into March Madness a lot more than they do AP poll.
Man, as someone that like just gets to enjoy bracketology, like I get to read what you write, right? And I get to understand like what writers are looking at, etc. This doesn't make any sense to me sometimes. I'm just like, how did this team get to host, or how did this team get into the conversation of punching a ticket in, but this team isn't? Like, even just looking, we talk about Duke, like where's North Carolina in this conversation? That's been a little bit better, more consistently than Duke has, right? Like where do the Arizona State that started off pretty much undefeated, that they're going to be in a bigger conference, et cetera, than some other teams. Like there's so many different teams. Oklahoma. Have we talked about Oklahoma? Which at the top of this year, I ain't gonna lie, I thought they were going to drop out of the top 25 and never come back, because I didn't quite believe in the product on the floor. They have gelled and coalesced a little bit more than I anticipated. So shout out to Oklahoma. But like even Oklahoma, could they punch their way back into a hosting conversation?
Yeah, I have Oklahoma as a 5 right now, and I think they could easily get back into that conversation. Again, it's just a couple losses that they've had recently that have kind of pushed them out, and it changes so much week to week. Like if you had me on next week, I could be like, oh yeah, Oklahoma's a 3. It really depends. It changes so much. But again, it's like you say you don't understand it. Yeah, because it's wild, right? Like it makes sense that you wouldn't understand it, because it is just largely based on, these mathematical things that the committee are doing. And a lot of it comes from watching how they seed teams over the years. And that's how, I've kind of learned that the net is more important than anything to them.
When did you start doing this, Eden?
I've done bracketology stuff for a couple other places, but this is my first year doing it with you guys.
Sure.
So I would say I've gotten a little more intense this time around, but I did it in some of my previous employers like 4 or 5 years ago. But I will say, like, just a little insight into my silly math that I have to do for this, like, net is about 5 times more weighted than everything else, because they just really care about that.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in the past.
There
So,
you go.
yeah.
Okay,
So there you
sounds
go.
like I need a sister named Ellen and Eden to just help me out in
She's
figuring
great.
this out.
Yeah.
So before we let you go, because we're going to have you on throughout the rest of this
Awesome.
college season, just to keep us posted on everything that's going on. So you might come, Oklahoma's number 3. I just love the way you guys. But we also want to hear about another story that you wrote on the site that's really, really good,
Thank you.
about NYU. And NYU being undefeated and on the streak that is in the same conversation as a UConn streak. Break that down for us.
Yeah, so I spent a few days over the weekend with the NYU women's basketball team, because they have won 76 games in a row. That streak spans 2.5 years, 2 titles in there. And it's just pretty remarkable. They're a Division III team, but if you watch them, they really don't look like a Division III team. And I think that's part of the fun of this, is that because NYU is such an incredible school and it's in New York City where, lots of people want to be, they're able to recruit talent that could go to Division I mid-major schools. So that's how they've been able to be so good. But I think anytime you get talked about in the same breath as UConn, particularly if you're a Division III school, like that's crazy. And that's kind of what all the women on the team were telling me. It's like, I can't believe that, we're talking about UConn and then talking about our team. So yeah, it was just a really cool experience and such a cool team and a fun thing to be a part of.
That is so fire. I loved your story. I loved how it started, about this like mythic event that happened.
A
And
loss?
it's a loss. I was like, the funny part is that the last time they lost was against a team. Some of you may know this. I did not know this school at all. Transylvania.
It makes it sound very,
it sounded
super
like a vampiric type of like, is this like, what is happening? And then it's a real school.
Yes.
That was
the
their
use
last
of the word
loss.
sinister is great there.
Yeah.
Thank you, yeah.
Another really, really good line, thinking about just how efficient New York is, and also really, really tough. Just, you talked about playing them is like being a sugar cube in hot steaming tea, that you could survive for a little bit, but at some point the heat overwhelms you. And I was like, oh, Woo! Eden! Yes!
Good.
You ate with that! Yes!
Thank
So
you.
good. That
Thank
was
you
really,
so
yeah,
much.
it's really beautiful writing, but it also tells a really cool story. And I resonated with it a lot because, you know, the Ivy Leagues are in very similar boats, right? There's no athletic scholarships. A lot of folks are going to Ivy Leagues. Now, this is back in the day.
Yes.
Now you go to Ivy Leagues, you can compete for a national championship, okay? But back in the day, it was mainly because you wanted a great education. You wanted balance of both. Same thing. You don't work out in the summer. You get to go do internships and things of that sort. And learning about this New York team, like this, they are artists. They play the saxophone. They have all these other interests and things that they want to do. They want to. I'm sure this is the case that we also see on the D1 level. But when you know that the money isn't the same, the recognition isn't the same, the platform isn't the same, there is a greater appreciation for the love of ball. So really, really cool article, and appreciate you doing that work for us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think that was one of the most fun things is like, especially in today's day and age where, specialization is huge in sports, right? At a young age, you just got to focus on only basketball. And then by the time you get to college, like that is what really matters. And to them, that's their priority. They love basketball. They really love being on the team, but it's not their only thing. The coach was telling me about probably like once a month at least they have somebody leave practice to go do a Zoom interview to get like an internship or something and then come right back in. So it is a very different world, but a really fun world and, kind of something that I felt like should be talked about and should be highlighted.
Yeah. And you can tell that like Meg Barber knows how to coach because I think she's on the roster for the Nike Hoop Summit coming up in April. Like those are players who do specialize in basketball and like they wanted her to be a part of that team.
Yeah,
she
absolutely.
learning in your piece that she had been on the national team like coaching staff before.
Yeah, she coaches in USA basketball and, their top assistant, Nettie Respondek, played at Vanderbilt. She's been on multiple D1 staffs, but they just, there's been plenty of opportunities for them to go to other places to quote unquote move up, but they just don't want to because they're happy there and they get to play this really high level basketball with a bunch of kids that are just committed to it for no other reason than they love playing.
Oh, I love it. Well, go read this article, guys. It's a really, really cool story. Shout out to New York University for just being excellent, quite literally, since their mythic loss against Transylvania years ago. All right, we're going to close the show like we sometimes do, and that is telling you where to set your screens this weekend. So first up, I'm just going to hit on the very obvious one. South Carolina, Vanderbilt. We know Vanderbilt is undefeated. They narrowly got that win over Michigan. And this game is going to be the game to see if they're really about their business. Of course, South Carolina is a juggernaut coming into this game, and it's a big matchup for the top of the SEC. Of course, Texas is in their mix too, but in that top three, seeing two parts of the triangle go at each other, I'm very excited for that game. That is going to be on Sunday, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, Eden, I got to ask you, is there any matchup that might be actually impacting bracketology that you're looking at for this weekend?
Yeah, so, I gave some love to the A10 conference. We've got two of the top 4 teams in that conference, Richmond and George Mason, are playing. So those are two bubble teams, and that should be a really good one.
Okay, and then close this out. Sabreena, who you got your eye on?
Pretty obvious one, I think, but Ohio State, Iowa, we're always looking at second place in the Big Ten, right?
Yeah, right.
Although Iowa's still undefeated in the Big Ten, so you beat Ohio State, and all of a sudden you're putting a lot of pressure on UCLA heading into next week's matchup between the Bruins and the Hawkeyes.
There you go. Okay, guys, those are the games. You gotta look at those. Keep your eye on them. We'll be talking about some of them on the other side of the weekend, but we appreciate you guys tuning in. Eden, as always, appreciate you joining us for bracketology, breaking down some of your pieces as well on The Athletic. Make sure you go check her out on the site. We will be back next week with more Women's Hoops content, but please do us a favor and help us fill out this quick survey about you and your podcast habits at theathletic.com/survey26. As a thank you, 3 listeners will get an Amazon gift card for $100. That's a lot of money on Amazon, okay? 3 people will get that. So please fill that survey out. We value your feedback. We implement your feedback. We love your feedback. So unless you're like hating, don't be a hater. Just give us good feedback. That's what we want to get. So make sure you fill out that survey, theathletic.com/survey26. And if you haven't already, follow our show. Press that subscribe button. There's even a little bell on YouTube that lets you know when we're here. that's a thing I didn't even really know about like that. So I'm telling you now, press that little bell. It'll give you the notifications. And check our partner, Yahoo Sports Media Hub. It's not called the Yahoo Sports Media Hub. I just made that up. It's called the Yahoo Sports Hub. It's sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports. I just want to make sure you guys are paying attention, okay? Because I switch it up from time to time. But on behalf of The Athletic, Eden Laase, Sabreena Merchant, I'm Zena Cada, thanking you for listening, and we will see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to No Offseason. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.